In this week's AI Meetup, DeepSeek version 4, how you can get free access, why it's so significant and taking the world by storm. We also talked about my Obsidian second brain system, but unfortunately the recording did cut out. But there is a full video coming soon on how you can make this, and it will be a video for G-Core on how you can make this fully compliant and data sovereign for you. I hope you enjoy the live meetup. This is the weekly AI meetup. We talk about some news, so some things that have been happening in the world of AI. We do some demos as well, and we also talk. We got it working now. We're good. And we also talk about some research papers as well if we have some researchers in the room. So sometimes we have some people come by from Silicon Valley. We've had some people from OpenAI drop by, some people from Google. So I'm Harry, I am a tech journalist and I'm an AI consultant. I actually work for a company called G-Core. I'm like the face of their YouTube channel. And they're the kind of company you would go to if you're a massive enterprise and you want to run AI. You can't obviously send your data to ChatGPT or to Anthropic, to Claude. You need to set up an open source model on the server, so they'll help you with that. So I make a weekly video for them about AI news and how you run compliant, GDPR compliant, and data sovereign AI. So what are we going to talk about this week? I know the topic that everyone wants to know about, which is Obsidian and the second brain. So I'm going to talk you through what I built with my system and essentially how I give Claude persistent memory. So that means whenever I open up a new chat window, I can talk to it and it remembers what I've said and where it's let off. But it's also a bigger architecture than that as well. It's a kind of a second brain system that will automate and run itself. So we'll talk a little bit about that later, what I've set up, how you run it, and where to go if you want to know some more about this. We're also going to be talking about DeepSeek version 4. So what it is, why it's significant, how do we set it up, and what might we want to talk about with that, what's the story with DeepSeek 4. And I think also on the agenda, we also talked about some video editing as well. How can you do video editing with AI? If you've been following this meetup for the last few weeks, you'll know I've kind of set up a bit of a side channel, and the task has been how can I run it with AI without hiring an editor for zero cost? And I had very low expectations, and in a month and a half since running it, we're almost at 7,000 subscribers, and we've had multiple videos over 200K. So yeah. AI can indeed do editing. So we're going to talk some more about that today and what is my stack for editing with AI. But let's start then with DeepSeek version 4. Who here has heard of DeepSeek? Okay, everybody's heard of DeepSeek. That's great. That's great. What is the difference between open source and closed source AI? Who knows the difference? How familiar are we? Do I need to determine what the difference is between closed source and open source AI? Okay. So we have closed source AI. Closed source AI is probably what you're using every day. That's ChatGPT and that's Claude. Closed source AI means you pay the company for access to the model. So they are in charge of setting up and running it on their servers. You don't have to think about any of that. You just give them money per use. But there are several problems with that. Number one, of course, you are sending your data to them, which is a problem in terms of regulation, in terms of GDPR and all kinds of different things. So for most of us guys in the room, it's probably not an issue. If you've got let's say, a very high profile client, or you work at a massive enterprise in a regulated industry, it obviously is going to be an issue to do that. Second of all, you are at the mercy of whatever they decide to charge. So if they bring out a new model, they decide to change the pricing, if they decide that they're going to mess with all the rate limits, so you, as they have done recently with the Opus 4.7, then obviously you just have to pay. You can't really do much about that. You can try and be more efficient, of course, with the way you use the systems. So there are several problems with the model. So there are lots of companies that are releasing models, particularly from China, where they are giving you all of the what we call the weights and the data, which means you have access to the system like a piece of software, but guess what? You have got to be in charge of setting it up and running it. So you've got to figure out all the server, all the quantization, all of these things. But there is a middle ground, which is that you can actually go and pay a provider, let's say AWS, everybody's heard of AWS, Amazon, and you can actually go and pay them a small per minute use, or you can pay as you would do one of the closed source providers. So increasingly, these open source providers, of which DeepSeek is one, everybody's heard of DeepSeek, they're an open source AI. Increasingly, they are becoming more efficient, almost just as good as some of the top leading models, but they are significantly cheaper. And everybody, of course, heard of DeepSeek because they had this amazing moment about 18 months ago that took the world by storm, where they put out a model and it was just as good in many respects as the leading models at the time. It was O3 from ChatGPT, and they had trained the entire system, they claimed, on for $7 million. Now that might sound like a huge amount of money, but when you consider that GPT-4 probably cost over $100 million to train, pretty massive. And they trained it by doing something called model distillation. That was one of the things that they'd done. So they've done some really cool things with efficiency. A model distillation means what they've done is they basically, is in essence, used, set up multiple accounts, like many accounts, to get access to the leading models, and then they basically reduced it, like made it from being massive to getting a small subset of the data and using that to train their models. So they were getting all the knowledge and all of the information from the leading models, and then using that to train the smaller models. And that was a lot cheaper, a cheaper way of doing it. But they were doing this on the sly. To do that actually breaks the terms and conditions, of course, of Anthropic and Open AI. But it shows you this race that's going on, where we've got some model providers that are putting out models that are really great, and we've got this open source race which is catching up. And of course, if there is piety between the two, then why on earth would you pay one of the labs this huge amount of money when you can simply go and set up your own model to rent it? So DeepSeek have just put out version 4, and it is pretty cool. It is a really great model. So we'll go to DeepSeek, and it's cool for several reasons. It's cool because it's cheap and it's very efficient, but it's also a massive model. So this is DeepSeek. Obviously, they are in China, and as you see, you've got all kinds of options available here. If we go to Nivida, and that's not Nvidia. Here is Nvidia. So Nvidia actually will allow you to spin up these models for free to try them out. So if we go here to DeepSeek version 4 and we experience it, this is where you could try DeepSeek. So you could ask it to vibe code something. We could ask it to, should we try vibe code me a Pomodoro app in, let's say, red and cream, my brand colors, for productivity, and we'll see what it does. See if we can vibe code a whole app in the time we have. We'll set it to its task. So you can use these models, any of the open source models here. Oh, okay. So it's giving me that doesn't look like the code for a Pomodoro app. Okay, it's writing it. Yeah. So we've got to give it some time. So so you can see it's quite slow, and you can only do 40 requests a minute. For most people, that's going to be absolutely fine. But for production level, obviously you wouldn't be able to use that. You wouldn't be able to get away with only having 40 requests per minute. and you can use it in this chat interface. So if you want, you can actually deploy it. So I was just in the process of trying to set that up. Sorry? This is Nivida's build platform. So if we go back a step, I'll open up a new window so we don't lose this, and so you can see it.
So is that like just an online alarm or something?
This is essentially, yeah, it's similar to Olama, but Olama is running on your local system. This is just running on their system. So if we go to you can see we can pick any of the open source models. And remember, Nvidia now has got their own model as well. So we've got the DeepSeeks here. Google have put out their own open source model called Gemma. Remember, we've got Gemini is their closed source, Gemma is their open source, and we've got Mistral small as well. So I think it's sometimes easy to forget that the whole game is just ChatGPT and Claude. It's not. There's actually all of these availabilities for you that it's worth experimenting with. And so you can try it here in the chat, and then if you want to actually deploy this yourself, then these are like some of your options. So remember earlier I was saying if you want to deploy AI, you can actually you want to deploy some of these open source models, you're in charge of setting up your own infrastructure. These are kind of like pre-built for you. So it's kind of like it will be running on Deep Infra, and then they're going to charge you $1.74 per input token and $3.48 per output token. To compare that to Anthropic's prices are, I think, about $5 per input output token. So if we go Anthropic's API token costs, the Opus, Opus 4.7. So we can see if you're building an app, remember you have to pay these guys. You pay $5 per input token, and you pay, where's output? Input tokens. Output $25 per million tokens. Everybody know what tokens are? Everybody kind of familiar? Yeah, a little bit. So, yeah, it's not for one. It's not for 1 million. Okay, yeah. So again, I like to think about tokens in Harry Potter books. That's my favorite analogy. So 256,000 tokens, which is the context window of the older Anthropic models, I think, will get you, I think, Philosopher's Stone. It's usually like I say, Philosopher's Stone and Chamber of Secrets. 1 million, I think, will just about get you all 7 Harry Potter books. So remember, context window, the amount of information you can give the chat in one chat before it just expires, and you can't give it any more information. And so that's why we charge like that. And remember, tokens are roughly equivalent to kind of words. Not exactly, but there is a tokenizer where we configure the calculation. So bear these figures in mind. $5 per million input tokens. This is when you prompt it. You're paying $5 for every million tokens when you prompt it. And then $25 output. So this is what you pay $25 for the output that you receive back from the model. So the output is always more expensive than the input. And then we look at DeepSeek, and we see what is the price they're charging if you want to just pay them, and the $1.74, $3.48.
Is the token a standardized unit? Is a token on Anthropic?
Very, very good question. It's not. No, it's different. So how it's calculated is also part of it as well. So there was a story that I talked about on my G-Core video about DeepSeek, where the headline figure was GPT 5.5, a new model from ChatGPT that came out this week, was like double the price from GPT 5.4 in terms of input output. But then when you actually broke it down and you looked at things like efficiency, actually, because GPT 5.5 was a lot more efficient, it worked out to something like 20 or 25%, meaning that they were doing some very clever things that you wouldn't always be using those tokens. So the way they figure out how many tokens you're using is different. Opus 4.7, when Anthropic brought that model out, they actually changed the tokenizer, which is the calculation they make to actually work out how many tokens you're using, and they made it more expensive. So although it stayed the same in the back end, you're actually spending more. And by the way, if you're using the like most people are, you're just paying a subscription. Your usage is determined by how many tokens you use, and obviously the limit that you go over. So it does affect even people who are using the desktop, not just people who are coding. So the reason this is so cool is if we go onto the stats of DeepSeek version 4, we bring up the Decoder article, we'll see there are two things that are cool about this. This was see if we can find a using DuckDuckGo. So the decoder, this is one of the really, I think one of the best papers for reading about AI, is a DeepSeek version 4 is a good enough model for almost nothing, is the headline. Now, as you can see, they have a 1 million token context window, which is becoming the new standard. That means you can give it up to 1 million tokens before it expires in one chat. But also look at that 1.6 trillion parameters. That means that model is absolutely huge. OpenAI's open source model, GPT OSS, they have 120 billion parameters. And there are some models that are like 3.2 billion parameter models. So we're talking trillions, absolutely huge. But the cool thing about this is 49 billion active. So what does this mean? It means it doesn't fire all of the tokens at once. It only uses what it needs to use. And so this is a really, really cool innovation. And so everything that DeepSeek are doing is all about efficiency. It's all about how do we get as much juice as we possibly can. And VP4 Pro just needs 27% of the flops and 10% of the KV cache compared to version 3.2. What does that mean in like non-technical terms? In essence, it means it needs less compute power. So flops is just floating operating points per second, I believe. I'm going to actually check that because I think I might be wrong. But essentially, it's the number of calculations that the model does, that a computer does in 1 second. A floating point operations per second, almost right. So we can see, in essence, it's using less computer power compared to its previous models, but it's more powerful. And so all the time, these guys in DeepSeek are doing really, really cool stuff with how they make the model more efficient. How do they make it get more out of it while using less power, which is the name of the game. And why is this important? Why am I bringing it to your attention? Because I think a lot of people are getting hemmed by usage limits, and a lot of people are obviously starting to feel the squeeze from some of the model providers. And there are things you can do within Claude, but there is also, so much choice in terms of the models that you can use. And these guys in China are really, really doing cool stuff. And I think sometimes there's an aversion to what they're, because they're from China. But in actual fact, because it's open source, you could actually run DeepSeek on an American data center or in a European data center, and you could still be pretty compliant. Yeah. No, you would need a crazy laptop to be able to run this that doesn't exist. You need to put this in a server to run it because it's so big. So no, you can't do that. There are some models that can run locally, and we'll talk about that in a minute actually. So you can run some models locally. I've actually got one running on my computer. Who here has an M1 Mac or a Mac, Apple Silicon Mac? Okay. If you have an Apple Silicon Mac, you already have an LLM running on your computer. So all Apple Silicon Macs have the Apple foundational model on them. A very, very small model. That really is a pretty useless model for things other than data labeling, actually. But you can actually set it up. There's actually a GitHub repo with somebody who's actually jailbroken it and set it up. So I actually did download. I set this up. This is Ada. Ada is my little local chatbot, and you can see we've got two choices. We can run Quen 2.5. So remember this, 3 billion parameters. So we're talking 3 billion parameters, and DeepSeek is trillions of parameters. So bear those two things in mind. And I think this was like 2 gigabytes on my system to download and set that up. Or we have the Apple foundational model, which is running. And you can see it's good for nothing because you ask it any question, including what model are you running, and it just doesn't want to answer to you. So it's good for data labeling and doing basic things. It's cool for, sort of playing around with it. And this is just a small little wrapper that I vibe coded, and I called it Ada after Ada Lovelace because of the first computer, and I gave it a nice little logo. So yeah, you can run open source on your laptop, but it's not going to be very powerful. If you want the powerful stuff, then you've got to go out and either rent a server or you've got to pay on a per minute basis or an API per token basis. Yeah, that is a good question. It's kind of a little bit of a sort of a grey area. I think essentially what it means is like the number of kind of nodes. I would suppose is a good way of thinking about it within the model itself. Like the number of weights. We need a better definition than that. So let me think. Maybe we'll come back to that later. How can you describe parameters? I think a good way to think about it is like the number of nodes that's inside the model that's like firing. So if we think about models as like a brain, like a neural network with all of these different endpoints that are flashing that come up at different points, I think it just means that there's more of those within the model, but not all of them are firing all at once. Is what I think it's saying. Let me bring up if we bring up a neural network. Has everybody seen this before? Do you know what this is? Yeah. So this is what's going on in AI behind the scenes. So you do one thing, and then they're all connected with each other, and then eventually you get the output layer. So it's kind of modeled on a brain. So I think it just means this, but on a more, this is a very simple neural network, and the more of these sort of endpoints you have, I think that's the more parameters that you have. I believe. I might need to come back to you on that.
If you want to host something you don't want to go AWS, what's the good option?
Good question. I'm going to be biased and tell you G-Core, who I work for. Yeah, funny. Yeah. I will give you all the options. So yeah, I mean, look, these guys are like enterprise, of course, but they have an everywhere inference product. So if we've got products, we haven't got DeepSeek version 4 yet, but we've got everywhere inference, which it's the same thing as Nivida basically, but obviously you're paying for it. So it's very easy to set this up, and you pay per token. And so again, we've got a similar thing. You can try the model, so we can try Mistral 7 billion parameter model here, and Stable Diffusion XL, very large model. AWS, obviously another provider with Bedrock. Where else would you go? Nvidia. There's lots of places you can actually go to set this up. So you've actually got quite a lot of options there. If you can sort of get over the slight fear of people talking about endpoints and API keys and things, it's a good learning curve to get over, and then you've got so much freedom in terms of what you can choose. If you really, really just want to try out the different models and see how they are, another good place to go is OpenRouter. So OpenRouter, again, it's just a wrapper of the model. So they've gone up and set it up for you, and you just press Get API Keys. So if you go to chat, you can see they've got all of the flagship models here, and they have the closed source ones as well. And you can actually compare responses between the two. So we could say, okay, let's compare Claude, and then we'll set up we could say let's compare Opus with, and then we could say we want DeepSeek, and then version 4 Pro is here, and we'll get the same response from all of these different models. And you pay for this in by just topping up in credits. So you put $10 on it, and then you can use that $10 across all the different models. So that's probably the best way if you want to experiment with some of these models to see what they're like. Yeah, so if we go on pricing, you see their business model is they're marking this up. So you're going to be paying a little bit more on top of it, but what you're getting for that is the ease of access. So you can just literally choose whatever model you want, you top it up, and then you're good to go. You don't have to worry about API and inference and hosting and all of these complicated things. So this is the best way to try open source, I would say. Another way you can try open source is Gcore actually have Gclaw at the moment, which is their version of OpenClaw. It's running on Kimi 2.6. It's just been upgraded. It's actually completely free. So to set it up is really easy. You just go to Gcore, and once you sign in, so I'll just log into my account. So you go here, and then if you press Gclaw, you can literally just start chatting with this, and you can even set up a token on Telegram. So I actually have a video about how you set this up, which I'll share with you at the end. And so you can start chatting with this, and then you're chatting with an open source model with Kimi 2.6. Hi. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions about open source before we move on? You go for it. Yeah, that's a good question. So cost is obviously the main one. Data privacy is another one. Maybe you just want a slightly different flavor of LLM. What would be another reason? You want more control over the model, perhaps you want to quantize it in a certain way. When you have a closed source model, obviously you just get what's out the box. Most people are not really fine tuning these models or doing anything sort of with them, but with an open source one, you get a lot more creative control in terms of what you do with it. It's like getting a piece of software and you're given all the code with it out the box, and you can do whatever you want with it. Yeah, those would be the main reasons. Cost, wanting more control over it, wanting to try out different models, and also obviously data sovereignty and security and privacy as well. Those are the main reasons. Yeah.
Just legality as far as cross border. So if you start opening emails, someone sends me, and I use AI to open that, and the AI is in America, probably that person that sent me that email from America open their emails, right? Wouldn't I have to then host that in Australia? Or have it in the same precinct as me?
Yeah, so the data sovereignty is such a complex issue, but in general, and I'm wary of the fact that there is a cyber lawyer in the room. Yeah, do you want to answer the question? Yeah, too. Yeah. It would depend on your specific circumstance, but in general, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, generally you would set it up in a jurisdiction, and the idea would be you wouldn't want the data to leave that jurisdiction in that data center. So Gcore, for instance, has 210 what's called points of presence, which essentially just means 210 different locations. So when you set this up, you choose where you want it. So if you're a European company and you want to abide by European law, then you say, right, okay, I want it to sit in Luxembourg, in Portugal, in that data center, and then only people at my company who are authorized can SSH port into essentially the model, and then the data is technically not, the model is not leaving Europe. I think that's how you would run it. So a lot of these providers, they have data centers all around the world. It's not like because they're AWS, you can only run it in America. They will have data centers wherever you need them. So yeah, feel free to correct me. Am I right? Yeah. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, it's one of the big selling points of open source AI is that you can run stuff. I think there's a misconception in a lot of businesses that we can't run AI if we've got confidential data and we should just leave it and ignore it. And actually, that's not the case. You can. You just need to think about where your data is going and where your model is actually going and how you do it. And this allows you to do it. I also think another misconception is that because DeepSeek is from China, or that some of these open source models are from China, that means you must be sending your data to China, and that's not the case at all. Yeah.
Yeah, I just have a question on OpenRiver.
Yeah.
I was told that you can integrate that with Cloud Code, and if your Cloud Code is struggling on a certain point, you can essentially send that specific query, whatever you're trying to do, to OpenRiver, and it'll get instances from all your models.
Yeah, absolutely. You can do that. So the cool thing about Claude and the cool thing about any LLM, but particularly Claude, is Opus 4.7 is an amazing orchestrator. So you can give it, so long as something's got an API, you can just give it the docs and the API and it's good to go. So yeah, you could give it the API of OpenRouter and it could choose the model for you. Two caveats, things to remember about that. Number one, remember OpenRouter is marking everything up. So you might be better off just going to the source, going to Gemini, getting your API key, going to OpenAI, getting your get your API key from wherever you want. And second of all, just be mindful, particularly I find with the image generator, Claude likes to go pretty crazy. So you might find you're having to top up quite a lot with the APIs. But yeah, it's a really smart idea actually. You don't need to be copying and pasting. You could just give any API, any other LLM your API keys. But also remember, you are then paying twice because you're still using tokens on Claude to call the other model. You're still asking Claude to act as the operator, and you're paying on top of that as well. So sometimes it's worth doing that, particularly if you want the opinion of the models. It's a great thing to do. But just so long as, I think from a cost perspective, you're not going to get any benefit from that. You'll be paying more.
Did you manage to point Cloud Code to DeepSeek or then video posting?
I've not done that, but yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, we can do it. Yeah, we will. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
It's interesting because you have also the credits in Nivida, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You can use it for free.
Yeah, I believe that they've even taken away the credits. It's simply a flat rate of 40 requests per minute, which is quite a lot. How many people here are making more than 40 messages to a model in a minute? Most people are not, are they? So so as a normal individual, yeah, you can get free usage. If you're obviously a business, obviously that's going to be inadequate because you're going to have, presumably more than 40 customers who are making more calls. So you can't run it like that. You have to pay for it. So yeah, it's well worth trying. Nvidia gives you, I believe, 40 requests per minute, and you saw all of the models that we just brought up. You can grab it. So yeah, you can choose whatever you want. And here is the copy for our Pomodoro app. Shall we spin this up. So it's not, look at this, it's not quite as nice, is it, as Claude, where it gives you a nice little artifact and runs the, boom, here you go, here's the code. So, sorry? On this one, I don't think it is, no. I think if we could press tools, tools enabled. Yeah. So if we go to, and it's just giving us HTML as well. So there's no, I don't think it's giving us any CSS or any, so CSS is like styling. So let's go and see, we go to like HTML viewer or something. Yeah. See what happens. That's not bad, is it? There we go. Focus, short break. And I told it, make it in my brand colors, which are red and cream, and it's done that. So. No, I just said make me a Pomodoro app. So. Pretty cool, huh? Yeah. So, yeah. 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 Yeah, so no, literally, you're right. All this is HTML, right? So it's just the code. So if we were to actually want this as an app, so like this is an app that I vibe coded, then we need to put it in a wrapper. Usually I use Electron, and then it will sit as an app here. But then that will run locally. If you want this to be like in an app on the App Store or on a website where people can buy it, then you need to then host, then you have to pay for the hosting. You need to put it on something like Vercel, or I think Railway is another one. And you put it up there, and then you would wrap a front end around it, and then you need to think about auth, which is authentication. So like people have to log in with Google, paywall, and Stripe. So you have quite a lot of things to think about. It's not just the app; it's itself. If you want to run it, but this shows us what it would look like. So this basically is the code that would run once you had opened the app. This is what it would look like. No, we went. So what we did is we went to DeepSeek. We asked DeepSeek to write us some code for a Pomodoro app. So this is HTML viewer. So what this does is it basically renders the code. So DeepSeek gave us. Where are we? So DeepSeek just gave us the code. If we'd made this in Claude probably would have come up with a nice little pop-up box as an artifact. So what I've done is I've essentially given this to, I guess, like an artifact creator, an HTML viewer, to say render this with all these instructions as it actually would appear. So HTML. Yeah, exactly. And the question was raised earlier, like, okay, well, how do you run this as an app? Like, there are obviously a lot more things involved in this, right? Such as creating a Electron app, creating a paywall, creating a login so that people can log into it, and then you need to be thinking about also how many people are going to be paying and using this on an everyday basis. So if you suddenly had 1 million users, then obviously your bill for hosting is going to suddenly go through the roof. So you need to think about that as well. Yeah, there's just a lot of steps involved, but this is the finished product that would sit behind the. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's great. Any more questions about open source before we move on and talk about some other stuff? Okay. So yeah, the reason I brought this up, yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Do you use it much?
Open source. I don't have much of a use for it at the moment. I think I'm going to come on when I talk about the second brain to why I think it could be important, why it could be important with a second brain, and how you can essentially build a system that is model agnostic. That means you can port it around. But Yeah, I don't have much need to use it because the as we said, the main pain points that you would use it are you're doing serious heavy coding, and so you're always running your limit on Claude, and you want a more efficient answer. I'm not doing anything that needs to be data sovereign, certainly for myself anyway, and I'm not and I don't need to have worry about client confidential data. So kind of price, data sovereignty, and security are probably the main pain points, right? And price on scale. Yeah, but it really is to make the point that you are not the point of this is that the cost is a lot cheaper, but you're not necessarily going to run into quality issues. I think they're getting to piety basically, the open source and closed source. Yeah.
Because I guess like Cloud for Seller, you would be able to run that.
Sorry, what?
Like Cloud 4.7.
Yeah, that's not open source.
All the models are.
Yeah, exactly. All the so-called the SOTA, the state-of-the-art models are all closed source at the moment. But the narrative is that these guys are catching up, and so yeah. Here's what I think, and people can agree with me or disagree with me. I think if we are reaching a point where all the advancements that you're seeing in Opus 4.7 are all things like tool calling, they're things like design. They're not necessarily things at the architectural level. And so I wonder, have we reached a point where just giving it more compute and therefore more data is not really having much of an impact? A lot of people in the AI world